I want to begin by thanking Rabbi and the Mishpacha, sponsoring all these years, the Chaburah Yosef HaTzadik, the nishmat, Rabbi's father, Avinoam, Darchei, the Gdalya. And also to thank those who are sponsoring לעילוי נשמת from Gdalya, Ben Reb Shimon, the neshama
Amen.
So we're going to spend maybe this time and maybe one more time going over some of the halachas. I'd like to do them inside. I know it's not easy, and it's not necessarily exciting, but it's important for us to know. And I made it very clear at the beginning that this is even though there are things that we're learning that are new to us and that might seem a bit extreme, our modern sensitivities, and the way that we were raised here in America and so on. Nevertheless, we're trying to be honest, and we're aspiring to slowly build ourselves up to live the right way. After this image, I'm going to spend some time trying to understand the pneumias of Tikkun Kloli and the whole Indian of Einig, of pleasure and delight, because we're going to show them and to try to get back to the pneumias Einyanim. So, I know there were some more pages that were sent to you. You should have on your phones. You should have until page Lamed Aleph. We're on page Chaf right now. On page Chaf. Again, the complications arise of trying to find that distinction between Re'iyah and Histaklis. The difference that zone between Re'iyah and Histaklis that makes all the difference between whether a person is safe or whether a person is getting into the Rabbanis and their ISIS potentially. It's hard to make that distinction. So in Halacha Ches on page Chaf, Re'iyah Ba'alma. Re'iyah Ba'alma means, again, not engaging with somebody in an intense way. Seeing Re'iyah Ba'alma V'ofen Arai, the Fisha B'derech HaAvara. B'derech HaAvara. B'derech HaAvara means, again, not trying to have sustained eye contact and so on. Nechelku Bezer Rishon V'Achronim. This type of Re'iyah is the subject of a machlokes between many Rishonim and the Achronim. Yesh Matirin, Kevin Shloim Niskaven Lehanas B'Riyasa. There are those who are mekel. Since here the intention is not to have hana by seeing this person, is to be polite and not to look away or to ignore a person. It's being polite, and this is not considered to be a histaklus for the sake of having any kind of pleasure, or it's just being polite. It's derech eretz. So there are those who hold that this is mutter. Veish oisem lahabit afilu riya arois. And there are those who hold that it's also, even in such a way that one really needs to turn one's eyes away as much as possible. Ve'edei kedushin, hami'idim al kedushin. What about edei kedushin? According to this shita, that's so strict that you really not supposed to look at a woman, even a Re'iyah Ba'alma. Even a Re'iyah Ba'alma. And there are tzaddikim that have perfected the art of speaking to a woman without looking at her, and not making the person feel uncomfortable or very conscious of that. It's a certain thing that I've seen by different tzaddikim when I've gone to visit with my wife or with a student over the years. Well, they will look, but the look is always ever like a centimeter this way or that way. It's not that laser way of looking. It's a little bit like this. And some of you know Rav Busu, Zogazon Zayin. So in general, the Abu Chatzeres try not to have yichidus to talk with women, but occasionally, it has happened. There were certain emergencies, certain inyanim, and so Rav Busu also very polite and very pleasant and talking to, and the head is up, but it's always a little bit like this. That takes tremendous dexterity and skill and time to learn how to do that. And you have to be a person that's working on kedusha. It's not to make somebody feel uncomfortable and so on. So when it comes to Eidei Kedushin, so how does that work? So the Eidei Kedushin, I mean the Eidim are saying Eidus under the chuppah that Reuven is marrying Rachel under the chuppah. They're saying there's Eidus. So since there's Eidus, the Eidim have to see if this is the right person. So this is a bit of a commotion among the poskim. Now, with many of the collars these days, they wear very thin veils. So you could see the person, you could see who the person is through the veil. But if you've ever been to an old-fashioned chasna, it's like a foot thick. And could be that her shvig is under there, So because you look and you see she's not over there, so you don't know what's going on. Who's under there? So how does that work? So Vedic Kedushin, Amidim al Kedushin, Hiladas Oisim is also lehem listaka b'fnei hakar. K'dei l'hoid aleshin is according to these poskim who are strict. According to this is the Mahalach of the Rosh and many other Rishonim. According to this Rabbi Yoina, according to these Rishonim, the Eidei Kedushin are not allowed to. They're not allowed to ask the girl to pick up, or her mother to pick up to see who she is. They trust, in other words, there's a certain chazaka that the one that they're walking around with, and she's wearing the shmat, that's the person. However, according to those who hold that Riyah Ba'alma is mutter, and that's not called histaklos, to take a look at the kala, as we know, even Ketzimach from the kala Novach Suda, which we spoke a little bit about, that there's an avodah of praising the kala and so on. So there's a Riyah Ba'alma. So these poskim hold, the matirim, the ones who are more lenient, hold that not only are you allowed, but the Eidim are supposed to take a look to see the kala. The whole question of Riyah Ba'alma, a glance as opposed to looking at, that whole chiluk is only as far as the places of a woman where one is allowed to see. It's not referring to the places that are supposed to be covered. We're going to talk about the hair and so on in a minute. It's not talking about the places that are supposed to be covered. Places that are supposed to be covered, those parts of the woman's body that are supposed to be covered, all agree, all the Rishonim, all the poskim agree that in such a situation, even a Riyah Ba'alma, even a glance, is not allowed directly to look at a woman who is not dressed appropriately, according to halacha. So, the source of this, if you look back at page Chav Aleph, footnote Yud Ches, just not the whole footnote, just a drop. In Yud Ches, Isa Maseches Ksubas Amr Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani Amr Rabbi Yonason Mutal Estaka B'fnei Kala Kol Shiva K'dei L'Chavva Al Baila. So the Gemara says a fascinating thing, and this is part of this whole conversation about Riyah Ba'alma and how do we define Riyah Ba'alma. There, the Gemara is telling us that it's permitted to look at the face of a kala throughout Shavar Brachas. Again, to look at does not mean to stare at, but it means to look at. And the reason for that is K'dei L'Chavva Al Baila, because it sounds like it's a mitzvah. Rashi says, look at the amazing thing that Rashi says. It's probably too small for you to see over there. Kishiroya, you could move your fingers apart. Kishiroya hakol mistaklan ba nichnas yoifya belibo. It's amazing. When the chassan sees that his kala, it looks like people are admiring his kala, that everybody's looking at the kala, so then that endears her to him. So it's a very romantic heter from Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani, in the name of Rabbi Yonason. The problem is Relais Hilchos Kavase. We don't pass them like that. It's nice, but the Rambam, we don't pass them like that. Relais Hilchos Kavase to spend Shavar Brachas, taking a look at the kala. That's not the halacha. B'shita Megubet Sham. So over there in the Shita Megubet says, so the Shita Megubet raises this question. if we're saying, if we're so strict, and you're not allowed to even look at Riyah Ba'alma, to look at the Kala, then Heyach Nucha Limse Edom Shiro says Shiyasa Behinuma Viroisha Perua. And how are the Edom allowed to see the Kala when she's going? Her hair is still uncovered, and it could be that she's not wearing the thing over her face. Rabbeinu Meir Halevi Zal Tirates Binyanacher. The Davkel is Stakel Omru Deino Mutter. See, here is where we have the sherish of this kula, that Davkel is Stakel Omru Deino Mutter. When the Gemara is talking about the Edom seeing the Kala and the Olam acknowledging the presence of the Kala, they were talking about, Rabbi Halevi says they were talking about Riyah Ba'alma. They're not talking about Histaklis. They're talking about a glance, not looking at, a glance. Riyah Ba'alma Lefi Shah, B'Shah Shemalichem Le'Samut, but Riyah Ba'alma Lefi Shah. Now this Nakuda, by the way, this is how the Bach Paskins and the Marshal, and many Poskim bring this as a raya for that kula, that Riyah Ba'alma is mutter, the Edom can look at the Kala, and so on, but a Riyah Ba'alma. The thing here of Lefi Shah, for the moment. So we're going to see very soon that this is what makes things particularly difficult when you're working in an office with somebody. When you're working in an office with somebody, so the whole Metzias is not called Lefi Shah. Lefi Shah means you see a Kala, you go to a house, you see a Kala for a second, Mazel Tov, or whatever, you meet somebody, Shalom. But when you're sitting at a desk, when you're sitting in the same room, and you have a colleague that you're working with, there are plenty of sorrows that come from these situations. So then we have an issue here of it's not really Lefi Shah. So we're going to see what does Halakha have to say about how do we handle these situations. Okay. Seif Tes, page Rav Dalet. So until now we've been talking about halacha. These two shittas, we've been talking about halacha. But there's a midas chasidus. That's, I guess, it's something to strive for, but it's more in the world of optional. But it's a midas chasidus. There are those who live in this midas chasidus, not to look even a riyah ba'alma, after mekaymes hamagulim, even those parts like a woman's face that's permitted to see, even there not to look. Kodesh. The person who lives that way is a madreg of kedusha. Vein ba mishum yora, and if a person wants to live this way, and he's otherwise a person who's an Oved Hashem and working on himself, and is not considered to be arrogant or haughty to carry yourself in such a way, it's a midah of kedusha. But if you have a person that's not living in that world of midas chasidus and davke in this area, so then it could be that it's an issue of yura, of like trying to show you a tzaddik or something. But if there is a person who's very firm, I mentioned to you that my father Zichron Levacha had an older brother, Avim Hersh, and the older brother was a huge Talmid Chacham. He was a big tzaddik, this Avim Hersh. I heard about from my father and from other people, and my father said that from the time that he was 11 or 12 years old, that this uncle, of course I never met him, but this uncle of mine, that he would never lift up his eyes from the street. And we're talking about in Hungary in 1925, or it wasn't like Times Square, you understand. So, but and because there were four brothers, so they took turns every day. There was another brother who had Darchei to hold him, to walk with him. The Avim Hersh didn't look. Chavusel Minchas 2 weeks every year. You go to Minchas along with Minchas, a big tzaddik. And Mamish didn't. My father said he never lifted up his eyes. Even when there was anything, there were cousins in the house, girls, women. Just Avim Hersh he lived in that world. There are Jews that live like that. and when a person is in a place of midas chasidus, it's not considered to be arrogant and so on. It's consistent with the person's behavior. Hamavdol ben Riyah l'Estaklis. Achiluk hamavdol ben Riyah l'Estaklis, who dak kechut hasayra. That's the lashon that Rav Osner uses in his Shiur, Shiur Shevet Halevi and Hilchos Nida. He speaks about this, and he says it's dak kechut hasayra. This distinction between crossing over from Riyah Ba'alma to Histaklis, it's like a hair's breadth. You have to be a very, very honest person with yourself and a very eloquent person. The koshel adam lahavdil beinehem. It's very, very hard for a person to make this chiluk, to know this chiluk. V'af b'riyah arois tzarech zehirus yisera shelo lav alidei Histaklis. The person should always be very, very careful. You see in Chav Daled, there we have the lashon of the Marshal in the Yam Shel Shlomo. La'achar shabiyah shem ikar hadin ein isur b'riyah ba'alma l'fi daito. The Marshal paskin that Riyah ba'alma is mutter. He's mekel, but Riyah ba'alma is mutter. Hoysif akasa, but even the Marshal adds at the end, fa'afilu hachi misha yuchal lihizar lo hoysif asar u'shmir. Nevertheless, even though ikar hadin Riyah ba'alma is mutter, but even the Marshal holds that a person who's able to be stronger and to add azhara u'shmira u'parish mikol mila deshmaya v'yidesh lo yachshav lekahara, and he knows. In other words, that's exactly what the Marshal is explaining. He's a person who is known as living in that place of Midas HaChasidus, and he's very, very meticulous, very careful with halacha in such a way. And v'yadesh lo yachshav like kihura, he knows that people are not going to see this as being something which is out of character, but they're going to see this as being part of his mahalach in life, as being completely consistent with his character. Nikri Ish Kodesh. That's called an Ish Kodesh. This is Aish. If you ever had the pleasure and the excitement of hanging around a little bit with Simaya, so that's the Ish Kodesh. It's a different madrega of a person, Ish Kodesh. To see, it's a different madrega. But Torah Bracha, that's a beautiful thing. It's a madrega, but it's not for everybody. See if you quickly. Therefore, the consensus of Poskim say that the Eidei Kedushin do not have to look at the Kala. I've been at some chasnas where the Rabbi or the Moshe Kedushin, they were very makbid to lift up she should lift up the thing. It's an awkward, embarrassing moment. Stam, without any halachas of Shmir Zainayim, it could be embarrassing. And there's no Chinach Chayiv to. You're not Chayiv to look at the Deidim and Chayiv. Let's talk al Kalka de Lahoyd Aler, Redailam Bezeshem Idem, Al Guf Zeshin Iskadsha. They know this is the person that has been going around. Guf Zeshin Iskadsha. This is the person. Even though they won't see her, they didn't see her, they won't see her, it's okay.
Rabbi,
yes.
Do you have to watch them put the ring on? The Aid have to watch the ring?
Yes. We'll see that's a part of the body that's Megula, and it's totally permitted to see the hand. That's totally okay. See, yeah. They didn't have to watch the ring going on the Kala's finger. Yud Aleph. So, Seya B'isha Nachshav Ereva. Of course, the hair of a woman. We're not. We'll see in Yud Beis that we're not talking about a pnuya, a single woman, but a married woman. The hair of a woman is considered to be erva. It's a din of erva. V'osel stakel v'sa'ar, and it's forbidden to l'stakel, to gaze at the hair of a married woman. Ve'naf k'minit ben se'er shahaderach l'chasoisam, l'se'er she'ein dark l'chasoisam. And as far as the din of Shmir Sinayim, her staklus is concerned, there's no chiluk whether this is a woman that normally covers her hair or if it's a woman that doesn't cover her hair. There's no chiluk whether she does or she doesn't cover it. As far as Krishma is concerned, there I mentioned a few weeks ago there's a famous psak of the Darchei Shulchan that caused a big commotion. The Darchei Shulchan in Siman Ayin Hey is mekel that if there's a woman who doesn't normally cover her hair, so he says that Bizmanenu in our times, he was talking about the beginning of the 20th century, where he wrote very strong lashon. He said that tragically it's horrible, it's terrible, but many of the women in that area, in Lithuania, in Russia, and so on, that they didn't cover the hair. And he passed, and therefore people are already used to seeing that, and it doesn't take anybody's attention, the hair, because it's so common that they were wearing their hair uncovered. So there he was makel as far as saying Kriyishma is concerned, to be in the room with such one saying Kriyishma. He never, and there are people that go around quoting that Ki'ilu, the Darchei Shulchan says you're allowed to look at her. He wasn't saying you're allowed to look at her hair. He was just saying that you could say Kriyishma, because we're regilim. There's already, the oilam is already used to having many women that are not covering their hair. But it was never a kula as far as the din of histaklus. That's just kriyishma, but not as far as histaklus is concerned. Yeah.
A guy also?
Yes. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Yes. So but he just brings down enafkim as far as histaklus is concerned. Enafkim ben seisha derech lachasayis and shein darchel lachasayis. There's no difference whether she covers the hair, she doesn't cover the hair. There's no difference. So the hair that's allowed to be uncovered, let's say it's according to those poskim, in her house. I'm not going into into all these dinim as far as kisui rosh is concerned. But regardless, as far as histaklus is concerned, it doesn't make a difference whether she normally covers the hair, she doesn't normally cover the hair. As far as histaklus is concerned, it's the same din. Whoever the mitzias of a married woman's hair is that cheftza on her head that's called hair has a din of erva. Period. Has a din of erva. Sha'os lo. Again, we're not talking about Riya Ba'alma, there's a machlokas, but Riya Ba'alma is okay. But l'stakel is not. What about if they cut the human hair, it's a human hair shaitel, and it's sitting on one of those scary foam things that are all over my house, those ladies you meet in the so you have the shaitel sitting on the statues, whatever they're called, on those heads. So they started making a couple of years ago. They started making the human hair shaitel. So is it a din looking at the hair when it's not on the woman? No, it's not. If a person knows himself that there's this certain interesting kind of guy that he's in yonim with those gals that are so he has to know himself too. But he probably needs to sign up someplace else. but otherwise, it's not a din unless it's on the woman's head. It's not a din.
Rabbi, if it's the woman's own hair that she uses to make a shaitel?
People do that? Yes.
Yeah.
They have their own hair cut off and they make the shaitel.
Yeah. Human hair.
It's interesting. So that, strictly speaking, al pi halacha, it wouldn't be also. But if the husband, if that's mo'ir or something, then he has to be honest with himself. Then when it's not allowed, then during the time of the month that he wouldn't be allowed to. So wouldn't be allowed to look at that either. But that's interesting. I didn't know. Okay. So, but as far as the simple halach is concerned, hair that's on the person's head has a din of ereva, and it's also stakelba. Ella dim darkel chasoisam hem nachshavim k'mekarmis hamachusa. Shecham behem dine histaklas yoser. However, in the case this is touching upon what the Aruch HaShulchan was discussing, in a situation where you have a woman that darker is l'chasoisam, or in a place where in that community, in that neighborhood, that the way of the women is to have their hair properly covered, then the hair also has the addition has the status of being a mokum hamachusa, a place that's covered on her body. So that would be enough. There would be chilukim as far as kriyishma and other dinim are concerned for saying a bracha and so on. So this is an important nafkimin as far as davening and brachas and kriyishma. But practically speaking, as far as the halachas of histaklus is concerned, we're not allowed to look at, regardless, we're not allowed to look at the hair. And we saw that. Take a look at Chavtas, just to refresh our memories. The Lashon of the Rambam. The Rambam writes, and it's in Chavtas over there, in Isur Bia. He writes, even if you look at the etzba ketana, going back to the ring on the finger, if the kavana is lehenais, if the person has kavana to that also for some reason that gives him excitement, a thrill, commission is takel b'makam atarv. The Ram says then it's the same thing as looking at a place of the body that's covered. The Ram here mentions kol b'isha erva, listening to a woman singing, and looking at the woman's hair. There are a lot of people who are raised in more modern schools, in more modern neighborhoods, where this has come and comes as a shock to many of the chevra, of our brothers and sisters from those communities, that they don't know that it's the rice. They think that covering the hair, that for a woman to cover her hair is a midas chasitas or something, but it's not. It's Gemara says roisha puru deraisi, mideraisa. It's a din from the Torah. T'chsiv u'paras roisha isha in the parasha of Nazir, of the Saita, taking by the Saita that her hair is uncovered as part of the procedure of the Saita. The Tana de Yishmael. So here, b'nai Yisrael, it could mean that it's talking about even unmarried, even single girls. And this is machlokes rishonim. There were times and places where there were Jewish girls, little girls, from the time they were 3 or 4 years old. They would wear their hair covered, especially by the Sfadim. There were many communities like that. It's very uncommon these days, but it wasn't in the old days.
Rabbi,
Don't tell me you saw that in Germany. Yeah.
What's the problem when you go ahead and have a Rebbe teaching girls? What's the halacha there?
So I'm telling the guys, try to stay away from that. It's a very rough situation. Somebody's asking a very important question. And this was, and again, it's something that we take for granted. Look, of course, this is so obvious, it's so poshut, it's a huge mitzvah. But I mentioned Germany a minute ago, and when that began, when seminaries began, and there were actually male teachers, which did begin in Germany, and then it was Sarshneer, even in Poland, there were many poskim, Rabbanim, that came out very strongly against it. And not going into the history, there's something very fascinating about that whole story of men teaching women. It's a problem. It's a problem because on the one hand, in order to be an effective teacher, there has to be eye contact, right? So it's a serious challenge for a person who's standing in a classroom, and I believe that it was less of a challenge in earlier years. There was more discretion and more tznius in general. I'm not talking about just halachic tznius. I'm talking about people who were more tzanua. And it was less of an issue even 10, 15, 20 years ago. But I have to say, in complete honesty, I've told this to Talmidim of mine, that I do not believe that men should be teaching women these days. And I mean, saying if you're 50, 60, 70 years old, but that's for another reason, not just because of the din of Istaklis, which applies even if you're 70 years old, but because of the huge problems that are out there, which I've unfortunately had to deal with all kinds of crazy stories, terrible stories. That if this would ever be written up in the books, the terrible stories that have happened in different seminaries and different schools, terrible stories, families ruined, lives ruined, all over the place. This has happened. So for the Chachamim to say, I can go and I'm not going to sin. If there's a 30-year-old Rebbe who can say that I have no problem being in a classroom with 12th grade girls, he's either a liar or he has other inyanim, right? But it's a normal, healthy young man, whatever that means. Young, it could be young at heart also, but a healthy young man teaching girls, in my opinion, nowadays is something which is very, very not recommended. Is it to say that it's also api halacha? I wouldn't dare go to say such a strong thing to say it's also api halacha. Each person has to know himself. But I think that the issues there are much. So even though we could say, well, they're all pnuyos, if it's single girls, as opposed to teaching married women. When you're teaching married women, and the women who have their hair uncovered, we have all these dinim of istaklos, where it could be a ser b'isha, where it could be deraisa, with her hair uncovered and so on. There are other issues, but as far as a man teaching either single girls, then the main problem is not the hair. The main problem is these dinim of shmir seinai, of istaklos. To say that it's a riyah ba'alma, that you're in a classroom and you're not really looking at the girls, you're trying to reach them. It's a serious problem. I don't have an answer to that. Why is that permitted? Why would it be permitted? I don't know what the kula is. There's no kula because of chinuch. There are plenty of wonderful women teachers. And by the way, let's take that to the next step about doctors. The Gdalya posting came out very, very strongly over these past 30, 40 years that Baruch Hashem, there are many women doctors now. Thank God, we never had that. But we have very, very capable women doctors. Is there a heter for a woman to go to a male doctor these days? It's very hard to say. For a woman to go to a male doctor? If there's a competent, equally competent female doctor. I'm not saying. If you don't have, of course, she has to. But if you have an equally competent, so there were many letters that the tzaddikim came out very strongly about this. So they want to say that as the man, it could be a heter because Agav, his malach that he's doing, like there's a famous shul from Rabbi Yosef where there was a guy, there was a lifeguard, by the beach. He's a frum guy. So Rabbi says, get down from that and get yourself another job. So the question of being mekel was, well, he's concentrating on his work, on his job. You know any lifeguards like that are concentrating on their job? When's the next shark out there? No, he himself is a shark, and the girl's got to get away from him. Or you have these musicians that are standing by a wedding, and they're standing over the women's section. The women are jumping around. There's so many questions. It's stopless. See, so the cooler that the chevra that these musicians or doctors they use, as far as they're concerned, the women whether they're allowed to do that, that's something else. But as far as the men are concerned, they had to be that they're preoccupied with their jobs, and they don't want to lose their panosa. This is their jobs, and since they're concentrating on their work, so they're not going to be distracted by looking at things that are not appropriate. But that person has to know himself, and every teacher who's in a classroom has to be honest with himself, to be an ehrlicher person, to know whether this is something which he should be doing or he should not be doing. And I'm glad you asked it, Ernie. It's a very, very painful and difficult sugya, this whole issue of men teaching women, especially in these places where the girls go away for a year to learn Israel, and they're not in their regular place, and they're all more vulnerable and lonely, and they have a wonderful, warm, good-looking 32-year-old Rabbi, invites them over for Shabbos, and I don't want to go into the rest of the story, there's terrible fallout from these things. And they have to be honest with themselves. And the girls, it's not their fault. They're tamimistic. It's not their fault. Yeah.
On that same topic, Lubavitcher Rebbe had met with so many people. Did anyone ever ask him his derech on the way when he would speak to women when they would come for dollars? I mean, you would always see so many pictures.
He never looked at anybody. Lubavitcher Rebbe. He had a way of doing that. We don't know how to do that. He looked at the men. Never looked at a woman. And the chassidim who were with him for all the years, who were mishamishim, they knew the sod of this. It was a remarkable thing. I don't have an answer how that works, how he did that. But he was Malach Hashem Tzavakas. Malach Hashem Tzavakas. As I said, that there are tzaddikim that I've seen that they have a way of doing it, but if you look carefully, you could see it's ever so slightly. It was like that with the Rebbe too. That again, none of us ever had. You had a chance to look in the Rebbe's eyes for too long because the guy was throwing you away. But you never saw how he looked at it. But I have spoken to people who saw him and were with him, and I've seen things written about it. That when there was a woman, it was different. How he looked, it was different. And he had a way of doing that. He was very conscious of being mechabed people and so on and so forth. Look, the Baba Sali didn't let any women. There was I read in the Sefer about the Baba Sali that there was some kind of a thing. There were many men that gathered under his mirpeset. I don't know what was going on, but the Baba Sali went to talk to the men to say Torah, to give chizuk. There was something going on. I don't know in Eretz at that time. So there were thousands of men that came to the Baba Sali's where he was there. The only men would go there. The only men came, and the Baba Sali came out, and he pointed and he said that there's a woman here, and there were no women there, but what they did was they went looking, and exactly where he was pointing, there was an Egged bus stop, hundreds of meters away, where there was a woman, and he was going like this. So they had to like clear out the whole town. Baba Sali. No, he was with Kedusha Seinayim. Anybody ever see the Baba Sali? I was actually to be there twice. You saw anybody see the Baba Sali? Kedusha Seinayim. Even when just with men, the way he was, his eyes. To be in the presence of a person who never ever looked at something that you're not allowed to look at. It's like the Satmarov Skusin I was like to be it's different. This is the different. It's like Malach of Hashem. The whole chilik between one person and another person. With the Baba Sali, the Avodah, there are many stories with the Baba Sali, the Kedusha Seinayim. Many stories. And then by him, the Nisim were all over. I saw myself. I mentioned it. I saw myself by Baba Sal. I was there by Sudas. He only ate by Sudas Misses, or either a Siyam or a Tzadik's yard site, and I was there, and there were. I was sitting there. It was packed in the place. I don't remember whose yard site it was. It was a yard site, and the fellow sitting next to me said to me, "Watch," because the Baba Sal was giving Kodesh bracha to everybody. And then he took a towel, the Rabbi Sali, and he wrapped it around the bottle. And the guy next to me said, "Just watch." And I was there. The Rabbi Sali was pouring from that bottle for hours. And when he covered it, I saw there was this much left. There's not something in a movie. There was this much left, and the guy said, "Tistakel hazeh." And I looked at the bottle, and I said, "Ma," I said, "Chake." And then he took a towel. And he was pouring from that bottle, Kaishal Brach. It's a different. This was an hour time, and that's almost. It's not so long. It's 45 years, whatever. It's not so long. There's such a thing in the world. This comes from Shmir Seinayim. It's a different person. A person who lives in the inside of himself in such a way. It's a different madrega of a person. So he brings Yavika Din, Gilui Se'avisha, Isav Nor Ksubas. Oh, we read that already? Yeah. Well, Paras Rosh Isha, V'ton V'yishmol, as Harlib Neis Hashosh, L'yetu V'pari Rosh. Parish Rashi, Navdin Le'hachin, L'navla, Mida Kneged Mida. Well, the Saita, that's also a question. How were the Pirchei how were the Kohanim allowed to watch this? So on, in order to humiliate her, the Sota, her hair was uncovered. That was part of the tahalich of the Saita. So we learned from there, it's a midah keneged midah. In other words, if that's the way of humiliating her by uncovering her head, it means that the covet of a woman is that her hair is covered. She uncovered herself and had an affair with somebody, and this is the midah keneged midah that she goes through now in this situation. So the Gemara is explaining the source of this din of kisui rosh, of a woman covering her hair. So the word says upara means to uncover, to reveal, to uncover. Which means that before they took off her covering, her hair was covered. That's why it says upara. It means that the Gemara understands that every single Jewish woman certainly every married woman wore her hair covered. That's why when it came time for this to take place, there needed to be upara. You had to uncover her hair because everyone wore their hair covered. That's the ikar limud, is that we see from here that it's not the way of Jewish women to be seen with their hair uncovered. Now, how that translates into, we'll see in a minute, Das Yehudas, Das Moshe, the Reisas, the Rabbanans. We'll talk a little bit about it. I'm not going to go into the whole Indian of covering the hair and shaitels and tichels and all of that. We don't need to go into that. That's more an asik for a different time, not for now. Yud Beis. Ulam bibsula pnuya ein sarnashav eva. However, with a single girl, the hair is not considered to be erevin. Lachain af mutalikras kriyishma connected. Therefore, there's no issue learning kriyishma the girl, single girl with the hair uncovered. The komakam yesh omrim sheyesh lezaher hecha de'efsher Shalalikos Kriyishma Tefillah B'Divrei Torah Keneged Sa'aroseh. However, there are poskim who say that if possible, it's better to be careful, if you can, not to read Kriyishma to daven, even with a daughter or a girl whose hair is uncovered in front of you. It's only from a Kriyishma, right in front of the person. However, as far as seeing the girl's hair, Vadai Listak, I mean looking at, going back to the teacher in the girl's classroom, looking at the girl's hair, Vadai also Listak it's you're not allowed to look at the hair, even though it's not considered to be, it doesn't have a din of erva. As far as Kriyishma is concerned, it doesn't have a din of erva. Nevertheless, there still is the issue of a nishmat, which means that we're afraid that it's going to cause a person to have a hurei avera. So again, are they makel in the classroom because of teaching and learning Torah and so on. So there are all kinds of kulas that they try to use to rely upon, and each person has to be honest. Yud Gimel. Let's just do this list halacha for now. We'll try to finish what we're learning this limud next week. Also, let's talk about big day isha sha'aleches levush abhem. It's forbidden to look at the clothing that the woman wears. Avshem is kavan l'stakel rak al yofi habeged. Even though you're not intending to look at the woman herself, just to admire her wardrobe. V'chem bebegadim hamavim they hear also l'stakel b'hem. Av she'enu mistakel b'gufei isha. And the person again has to know that if by looking at the clothing, it would cause a hero of a thought, then it's also a stakel behem. Then you're not allowed to look at these clothing, even though you're not looking at the woman's body, you're just looking at the coat or whatever she's wearing, or the outfit that she's wearing. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do that. Okay, we'll stop here, Mr. Shem. We'll finish next time.
That apply when it's also not on a person?
Yeah, let's see where's the... Yeah, that's many poskim are machmir. That would be the case even though it's not on the person. There's a machlokes as far as that's concerned. But most of it, even if it's not on the person.
45 early mid